Well, thank you so much, obviously, for joining me on my new series, my Poppy's Perspective series about climate tech companies, startups, all of the like. And basically, as you know, we'll just chat through some questions and just kind of get more of a feel for what you do and what DrizzleX does and all of that kind of thing. So, I mean, we can start quite simply with sort of like, what's the core mission of DrizzleX? And for those who don't know what it is, like, what does DrizzleX do and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so DrizzleX, and this is kind of what sets us apart in the space, is the only company that can allow property owners to understand how water is being used down to the fixture level, specifically without any kind of major plumbing expenses being involved. So our goal with this is just to provide that visibility and enable real estate owners to make change. Because the problem is right now, for most people, especially in the United States, you have what's called a master meter on your building. And you can look at the water bill when it comes in. You see it's high, but ultimately you're always working from behind. And so you'll get a high water bill. And let's say it comes in halfway through the next billing period. By the time you even analyze the water bill and you try and put something into play, you're already a bill behind. And so it can take 3 bills to even see an effect if you were right about what was actually wrong in the first place. So we're providing not only the data on how water is being used, for example, how long someone ran their sink. We're creating actionable items for these property owners to then go in and make change. So not only will it say, hey, your toilet's using a lot of water, it's going to say your toilet's using 3 gallons a minute. And for most maintenance people, they're going to know, okay, that's a flapper leak. I'm going to go in and fix that.
Yeah.
Instead of walking into a unit and saying, oh, well, the toilet's not running, so no issue here, we're actually in line with the flow. On top of that, because we're in line with the flow, we have these millions and millions and millions of data points. So the obvious items like running toilets are certainly one thing we do, but we're actually are able to enable these real estate people to enact long-term sustainability, long-term change, and make sure their properties are able to maintain good water consumption, because we have these millions of data points as everyone's using water, so we know how fixtures are supposed to behave. We know how tenants are supposed to behave and what water consumption should look like. And so when things are off in an apartment, whether it's today or month over month over month, we're able to convey that to the property owners, but then also provide them with alerts or items that they can do to help enact behavioral change or go in and make replacements of fixtures that they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, and that is like, I attended an event literally last night where we were talking about like actual actionable solutions to like real life problems. And I know we've spoken about it a lot. Like DrizzleX at the end of the day, it's not a glamorous product. It's a need to have product. And I think that when you actually have that like actionable solution that you can say, this is the problem, this is how we're solving it and putting it together, especially with something as important as water, that's when, I don't know, it makes the most sense. So thanks. And on that,
it's funny because people don't I'll have conversations with people and they don't really understand how plumbing works in apartment buildings.
I don't.
And so if a building's not designed to be submetered, they'll just say, well, why don't I submeter it? And you have a pre-war building. By the time you repipe the whole thing in such a way that you can submeter, you might as well have just knocked down the building and rebuilt it, because it's going to be that expensive to rip out all the walls, deal with all the crumbling pipes.
Yeah, and I have no idea about how anything works. I'm probably the worst person in the world for my water consumption. But if I had something like that, I think I'd use it, and then you'd be more aware at the end of the day. So it actually works in sort of an actionable solution. Again, I said it again, but it does, because it shows you what you're doing and where you can improve, really. And then within that, so obviously DrizzleX is sort of hybrid between PropTech and climate tech. At the end of the day, it is a climate tech solution in the sense that it is a reporting solution. So do you know what trends are you seeing in the space? I don't know how up to date you stay with it, but yeah.
I mean, the biggest trend, again, going back to those actionable items, there's this expectation now that data is not enough. There's a million dashboard solutions out there. And I actually have quite a bit of my clients, when I first talk to them, they say, well, my team's not looking at another dashboard. They already have 8. And so you can have these robust data sets, but teams don't have the time or the energy anymore to review these, look at the numbers and see, well, what can we do? They're expecting you to tell them right now what's going on and what they can do. And especially with the advent of AI, that's progressing even further, because now we have the ability to have this technology do the work for us and analyze these, again, millions and millions of data points that not only DrizzleX has, but other companies in the space have, to allow these property owners to enact change in ways that they didn't think of before. So on, in terms of property tech or climate tech, those companies that are out there and established right now, their technology is going to become even more robust.
Yeah.
But if you look at the way that apartment buildings are monitored right now, everything is IoT. Everything is monitored. You have, even your oven. You can look at the efficiency of an oven via an app and understand if it's a problem or not, or a thermostat or a boiler. But with AI, we're able to see a shift towards those items that right now no one's shedding light on. So for example, in our case, plumbing. Before, no one wanted to touch plumbing because you have very, very old housing stock with old plumbing that has not been upgraded. And so you have these crumbling, crusty pipes with particulate, and you have to worry about clogs and leaks. And there was really no way to, both in a cost-effective manner and practically, monitor these systems. But now that we have the robust hardware to do it and we have the data points, we're able to shine light on things that, before were just kind of guesswork. And there was no way to look at it. I mean, if you had sub-meters, if you were lucky enough to have a unit main line, you could have a sense of how an apartment was using water. But these areas that people just neglected are now going to be added to that arsenal for property owners to monitor how their building is consuming items, whether it's energy or water.
Yeah, and that is something else that I've been thinking about a lot, because obviously in the UK and the US as well, you do have so many old buildings, pre-war buildings. I think the building that I live in is probably from like the 1800s. And there's so many challenges to like make all of these new solutions kind of come into the properties. And I think that kind of leads on to my next question, which is, like, every industry has its hurdles. Like, what do you see as the toughest challenge, like, facing climate tech, property tech right now? I mean, like you were saying then, there's so much innovation going on in AI, in everything, but how do we actually like adopt it, and what other challenges are there?
Yeah, so everyone wants to include sustainability technology in their buildings. You have all these companies that say sustainability is a core focus of them. But the problem is, if it doesn't have ROI, if it doesn't boost the NOI, if the dollar is not worth it, they're not going to do it. And right now you have huge amounts of rising costs in the US, whether it's building materials, you have rising insurance costs, interest rates, these things that are kind of beyond my pay grade, but it makes these real estate owners more risk averse than they already were.
Yeah.
And so, you want to implement technology, this new, especially new technology that you've never heard of before, that can attack these issues that before you were just stuck with, but you don't know for a fact that it will work. And so how are you going to make room in your already very, very tight budget to include these things? I mean, I've seen for DrizzleX, I've seen situations where people's water bills are so high that they say, well, we can't afford to implement a system to lower it.
That makes no sense.
Exactly. But it doesn't make sense, but at the same time it does, because you're adding on in the short term DrizzleX an operating expense to use the system, which will lower things in the future. But if you haven't seen the result already, it's that first building that is the challenge. But once our clients see a 30%, 50%, 60% drop in consumption across the board, they'll put it in. because they
Yeah.
know what to expect. But for people who haven't experienced that savings yet, it seems too good to be true.
Yeah, and that's when like greenwashing comes in, isn't it? Because you see so many companies and so many people, and greenwashing is a buzzword, but you do see people just flaunting the green, flaunting the sustainability metrics, and then nothing actually happening because it, like you're right, they don't have the budget for it. They don't actually know what they want to do. Without seeing the result of what these sort of like solutions can do, it's hard. And how do you do that without getting into loads of businesses and loads of different clients and accounts? So that actually is a really, really, really good point, actually. And it's something that I haven't thought about enough, to be honest. But yeah, thanks. And it makes sense. And I mean, you've got loads of things in policy coming in. I know in the States there's like loads of water efficiency acts and those kinds of things, but it's when the
It's
adoption actually
slow.
comes, yeah,
Yeah, it's
it's not
slow.
working.
We can't count on regulation to get these things implemented because people are resistant to it. They'll wait as
Yeah,
long as they possibly can. It's really the only way to tackle this kind of issue is to get in there and change the way that you're introducing the product to these clients. So it's not the sale doesn't work anymore. You can't just
yeah,
sell the product, especially to larger firms. It has to be more of a partnership, and you have to get creative to find ways to ensure that these customers are comfortable and excited. Because at the end of the day, what we're selling is not a passive system. You don't plug it in and let it go. You have to
yeah,
monitor it, do the work, fix things. So, what's worked really well for us is making sure that both DrizzleX and the customer has skin in the game to make the system work. And
yeah,
so we partner, we put our own stake into it so they know we're serious about it. They know that we believe in our own system and we provide the support to make it work. Otherwise, people just aren't going to trust you because it's another product that they may or may not have think they've seen before. Maybe
mm,
they've been burned in the past. And it's hard to build that trust in a space with so many new technologies.
yeah. And it is. And I think trust is the biggest thing. And that's why you have to be excited about the products. And I mean, going into actual DrizzleX as a company, obviously every startup has to build out their team. They've got to start somewhere. What does like success, growth look like? And I know it's hard to say, but what do you think it looks like for DrizzleX over the next like couple of years?
Yeah, so even in the past 2 years, we've seen huge growth, both
Yeah.
in our customer base, the number of apartments that we serve or service, and then also our product capabilities, and
Hmm.
we are set to scale up the business, exponentially from there in the coming couple of years. But what growth really looks like for us is becoming the de facto water tool when it comes to multifamily water
Household name.
conservation and sustainability. Yeah, the household name, because right now our core market is those people who have apartment buildings where they're eating the water bill, the tenants aren't paying, and so they need to find a way to get their costs down. But that's just the tip of the iceberg and what we're able to do. There really is no asset that we're not able to help. So on the ones that don't bill, those are easy because you can get a foothold there and say, hey, we're going to drop your consumption by 50%.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
go ahead and save 200 grand a year, and it makes a lot of sense. But then you have portfolios that bill for water, and they may understand that their consumption is high, but how do you get them to care?
yeah,
And when people are billing for water, at least from my experience and hearing from friends and prospective customers, you have tenants that complain that their billing isn't fair.
yeah,
And so the way that you can make billing fair and make sure these bills don't get out of hand is by monitoring for water waste. Because if you can mitigate for water waste, and instead of having a $300 a month water bill for the tenants, if you can get that down to $100 a month, it means the tenants are going to be happier. You're going to have better tenant retention. Your leasing agents are going to be able to focus on leasing rather than dealing with those angry tenants. And so they're able to turn over units. You also have the ability to raise rent. It's
yeah.
easier to do that now because instead of having a $200 a month water bill,
So
plus
cheaper.
now, exactly. So now you can spend the money on the rent not the water, because otherwise, might as well go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And, finally, you have the issue of damage prevention or
Mm-hmm.
water loss prevention. So, there's infrastructural leaks, especially in big buildings. DrizzleX can be a way to understand down to the unit, depending on the plumbing layout, where there's actually a leak in the walls. And that's something that's really hard to find, usually until water starts seeping through. And by
Yeah.
that point, you may already have mold and you have to take out pieces of drywall, and it's a whole issue.
There's so many flats of my friends at the moment that are having leaks and random like spurts of water, and I think that DrizzleX product will actually be very helpful there. So maybe come into the UK market. And also funny that you said in the last 2 years you've had tremendous growth, because that's how long you've been there.
Yeah.
Owing it all to yourself, I see.
Well, it's not all me. I mean, it is built on the work that came before. The groundwork was there when I showed up to be able to put it into to get us into, far more customers.
A humble opinion, I see. But yeah, and talking about that, you said the groundwork was there when you came in. Someone obviously had to train you on the product. You understood it. What like qualities, what mindset do you really look for? And obviously we've spoken about this a lot at the moment, but is there like a DrizzleX DNA, something like value driven that you tried to find from like potential clients, potential candidates, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, so because I'm focusing more so on the sales side of the business, there's, resilience for sure, a laser focus on outcome, 100%. But I think the biggest thing that makes someone successful at DrizzleX is curiosity. Because we are the niche of the niche of the niche. We are in climate tech and prop tech, and then we're talking about plumbing even.
Yeah.
You have to understand so much more than just how DrizzleX works. As a salesperson here, you need to understand how plumbing works, plumbing systems work. You need to be familiar with all the various components of different types of toilets and shower heads, and know the household names for those brands, because ultimately it all plays off of itself. You need to be able to understand if a client has a specific type of toilet, based on the data that we've seen in the past, what value does the system actually even provide to them? Because it's not the same in every case. So, for example, we could look at a market rate property. So one that maybe even a little bit newer, has all new fixtures, because, if we look at even just the shower head alone, which is a pretty simple fixture, you could have low flow shower heads across the board. We could tell you if someone installed a high pressure one, but if you get leaks under control, what value does having DrizzleX on a shower head provide? And so if you see that someone's taking a shower for 4 hours and you are a DrizzleX salesperson, you know the assumption should be, yeah, they have wasteful showers. You're not allowed to go knock on the door and say, hey, stop.
Yeah.
But instead of looking at your water bill, seeing a spike, spending thousands and thousands of dollars on having maintenance teams go through an apartment, you're able to understand, if this person's using the shower 4 hours a day, what are they doing at the sink, the washing machine? What are they doing with the toilets? And so you know that, well, here you have a problematic apartment, and we actually have materials that help to enact behavioral change for those apartments. So you can focus your efforts in 1, 2, 3 places, rather than spending thousands of dollars and having your maintenance team waste their time doing that versus turning over units. And that all comes from understanding and being curious about how these things work. What is tenant behavior like? And what does the normal consumption data typically look like?
Yeah, I think someone definitely needs a behavior change themselves if they're having a 4-hour shower. I'd love that, but I think it'd be a waste of time. I do not have that much time. It'd be nice though.
It would be. I mean, it's so powerful what the kind of just the behavioral nudges can do. I remember when I started actually, and you had mentioned like someone had to train me on the system. So our CEO Esther, she had done a number of like demonstrations of the product for me, and we're talking a lot about behavioral stuff. And it's this nudge that people just don't know what a lot of water is. What does a gallon look like?
I don't
What is
have a clue.
And then also, how much does water cost? And at the time I lived in New York City, where I wasn't paying for water. Most people don't. And I would run the sink all day because I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And immediately after having those conversations, those just nudges of like learning what normal consumption is, immediately I became more conservative of my water consumption just because I was being mindful of it. And so it's something that's constant. You got to keep reminding people about it, but just those nudges without consequence, without, any anger, just the education of how water is being used. We've actually done a study and we saw that it could decrease consumption, or at least the cases we saw, we've seen consumption decrease by 10% from these nudges alone.
That's crazy. I mean, yeah, there's so much about it that I don't know and I should learn. And I'm actually learning quite a lot on this. So thanks. But that makes sense. And it's just nuts, isn't it? And that's why these companies are so important, because they actually do they do literally nudge someone to say, okay, this isn't normal. Change your behavior in some way. And that's both in commercial and personal senses. And then, yeah, obviously you had to be trained. You've been in sales for a while now. But what in your career thus far, and it could be at DrizzleX, it could be in previous roles, what was a challenge or even a failure, even though I'm sure you didn't have any failures, whether that is personal, professional, whatever, but something that taught you the most, almost biggest lesson learned, I suppose.
I mean, everybody has failures. I mean, otherwise there's no way you can learn.
Not human.
Failures. Yeah. I mean, I think back to when I started in sales as a BDR, and I was coming into the AE role. And after being a BDR for a while, I was definitely a little bit burnt out. And I had the belief that because the company I was at had this insanely impressive marketing engine, I thought that I would be able to kind of live off inbound leads. I learned very quickly that that is not a sustainable way to build pipeline, because a lot of these leads, sometimes they're just kind of browsing around. They're not serious as when you go and do outbound and you can change someone's mind, which is a really powerful thing and gives you a lot of influence. It was, I had a lot of trouble that first quarter. I mean, luckily it worked out for me, but it was a push to the finish line. It was really a rude awakening for me. That outbound is really the only way to get things done. Yeah. And that's changed my approach kind of across the board. Since I've come in at DrizzleX, we're a small company. We didn't have any inbound leads or anything like that. So we just had to knock on doors.
Yeah.
And without that, we wouldn't have the customer base we have today, because we have this impressive product, this really powerful product that's novel, but if no one knows about it, no one can buy it. And that's the biggest differentiator, is that we're going out there, we are talking to everyone. And even early on, we had no case studies, we had no huge names that we could brag about. And so we had to just talk to as many people as possible and show them, communicate the value until someone was just willing to try it. People were just willing to adopt it.
Selling them the dream. And
because it's such a common problem. Everyone's dealing with this. There's no one who isn't. Even those who are billing for water, there's some huge companies that I talk to where the problem is that they have such bad water consumption, or they're not monitoring it enough. They don't have enough green initiatives that it's hurting their ability to get capital from certain countries or regions that prioritize green investment.
Yeah. And I suppose, and that's what I was going to ask next, would be advice for early stage startups. I feel like you might have another answer, but also that is a big one. Actually just go out there and just do it at the end of the day. You have to start somewhere. Everyone does. But yeah, do you have any other words of advice? You've been at DrizzleX for a while. You have had a footprint on the growth. Yeah. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is in my opinion, you got to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
That's what does it most, because, and I found it shocking when I started calling here, how many people were willing to just say yes to talking about it when you called them. And you do need to understand who your ICP is, what is the title of the person that you want to get a hold of.
Mhm.
And from there, you just have to start making the calls, because no one's going to ever come to you. And
Yeah.
if you knock on enough doors, people will say yes. And so
Yeah.
that's key. So it's finding who the person is, and then just putting in enough reps that you start having conversations on accident.
Yeah, and people will eventually come to you, I suppose, definitely. I mean, definitely
Yeah,
with
I mean,
DrizzleX as well. How it's
assuming there's
soaring.
it's of course assuming there's a product fit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But if there's not,
But yeah,
go out and do the work. Yeah, and
there's
yeah,
nothing
do you
simple.
have any? Sorry, go on.
There's just nothing glamorous to it. It's just
Yeah,
the
but I think
simple.
that's almost that's the essence of it. Like it isn't a glamorous product, but when you actually learn the importance of it, it turns into a need to have, not a nice to have. And I think that is, it's almost better when it's not glamorous, because it's sort of like, this isn't my little sparkly product. It's actually something that people are like, actually, that would be great. I would save money, and
Well,
that's what people care about.
our dashboard is sparkly. Our
Yeah, it
dashboard,
is.
I mean, it's sparkly. It looks nicer now than 2 years ago when I started, and
Yeah.
we're constantly improving it. We're adding in AI features as well, and so there's so much you can get out of it. But it can also be as bare bones as installing these
Yeah.
and just getting alerts via email. You don't even have to go into our dashboard, because we designed it to work with any kind of maintenance team. But if you do go into our dashboard, there is more data there than you're going to find anywhere else in terms of water.
Yeah. Yeah, so is there, and quickly, I suppose we can round it up with like two little last things to say, but is there any companies you want to shout out? Any individuals you want to shout out? Anything like that that comes to mind? If not, fine, DrizzleX is the best.
I mean, in terms of, I can really speak more so in terms of people. I mean, the first person um, who comes to mind is really our CEO, Esther. I talked earlier about kind of that baseline when I came in. So, like, yes, I came in, I started doing the outbound, and have grown us, have
Mhm.
worked along with our team to grow us significantly. But I wouldn't have been able to do it if Esther, who built the product,
Yeah,
had no sales training of any kind, sold the product, got us enough of a client base, including some larger regional customers who were able to show savings of $500,000 plus a year, that allowed me to then go to other people in the market, especially larger firms, and say, hey, we were able to do this.
yeah,
Will you take a look? And without those kinds of even smaller case studies, and showing that the product works, and refining the product itself to where it was, we would not have been able to scale.
no,
We
not
would have
at all.
still been stuck. And she did
Shout
that
out.
also while being in another time zone, not
Yeah,
staying up till 4 in the morning.
yeah,
There
it's
is,
nuts.
and even today, even now that we've begun to scale, nothing has changed in terms of the effort that she puts in. It's
No,
support from the product side to the sales side to the customer side.
yeah,
She's still in touch with many of our customers, especially the ones that she brought on board, making sure they're happy, have what they need, and that the product is adapting to fit their needs.
yeah.
It's
Shout out to
amazing.
all of the CEOs, quite seriously, co-founders, everybody. It is nuts. I think the faces of sales kind of just take over, and it's like, no, come on, this is who we should be thanking, really.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Okay,
you
go
can't
on.
start with that baseline.
No, you
It's
can't. You literally can't. So thanks, Esther. We love you. But also, we've spoken a lot about DrizzleX. We've spoken a lot about water, about showers, about toilets. What is, and you didn't know about this, but what is something that is fun? A niche fact. This is almost my least favorite question when you meet a new group of people and they're like, fun fact, but it is good. Like, what is, maybe a niche passion, we were talking about running before, or a guilty pleasure, or something about you outside of work that's slightly fun?
yes.
Is there anything cool about you?
So I'm a sucker for playing music.
Nice.
It's kind of like It's what I do for fun. When I'm not working, I do it in the morning. My neighbors may not like it. Evening. So I've played the piano for 20 years. So that's a lot of fun, do that with friends. And then recently, over the past 2, 3 years, I taught myself to play guitar, which has become a little bit of a problem in terms of space in my apartment because I'm just collecting these things and it is not great.
Yeah, they take up a lot of space. I need
Yeah.
to get back onto that. I used to play piano. I don't play it anymore. So maybe you've inspired me. But that kind of
Highly
wraps it up, I
recommend.
think. Yeah, I know. But thank you so much, Aaron and DrizzleX and everything for this. And I suppose that's it, to be honest. But yeah, do you have any final words or are you all good?
No, I mean, thanks for having me.
Of course.
I'm just hoping that, we can get people to keep saving water. And I would love for there to be a world, and I say this to whenever I talk to ESG people,
Yeah.
sustainability people, where I'm like, I know we're about to have a great conversation where we're going to talk about saving water. But when you go back to the rest of your team, we're going to need to convert this to money. And I
Yeah.
wish the conversation, or I'm looking forward to a time when the conversation can be about
That
saving
easy.
water. The goal being to just save as much water as possible because it's not a infinite resource. It is
No.
very finite, and even places that you'd think would never have a water shortage are
Do.
struggling with drought.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping we can get there one day.